The transformation begins not with external force, but with a fundamental understanding of what truly happens within the human soul when weakness takes root. A person stands at the crossroads of his own existence, looking at himself in the mirror and recognizing a truth that has been obscured by denial and rationalization for far too long. The weakness that manifests as lust is not merely a physical desire, it is a reflection of a fractured internal architecture, a mind that has surrendered its authority to impulses, and a spirit that has forgotten its own power. When a man allows himself to be controlled by lust, he has already begun the process of self-destruction. It is not that external enemies will destroy him. Rather, it is that he destroys himself from within, and in that weakened state, he becomes vulnerable to every adversity that life presents. The weight of this realization becomes the first stepping stone toward liberation. Consider the nature of weakness itself. Weakness is not inherent. It is cultivated. Every moment that a person chooses comfort over discipline, gratification over purpose, and fantasy over reality, he is actively constructing the prison of his own limitations. The mind becomes a wasteland of fractured focus. The body becomes a vessel devoid of vital energy, and the spirit becomes hollow, echoing with the emptiness of unfulfilled potential. This is not prophecy or exaggeration. This is the observable reality of those who remain enslaved to their lowest impulses. Yet within this darkness lies the seed of transformation. The very moment a person recognizes his weakness is the moment he begins to possess the power to overcome it. This recognition is not a moment of shame, it is a moment of awakening. It is the day that a person decides that he will no longer be the architect of his own defeat. From this moment forward, everything changes. The path to destroying lust for good is not found in sudden breakthroughs or miraculous interventions. It is found in the daily repetition of small, deliberate actions that, when practiced with consistency and intention, reshape the entire structure of a person's being. These are not mere habits. They are rituals of rebirth. They are the 7 pillars upon which an unshakable man is built. A man who has conquered his weakest self and emerged as someone who can never be destroyed by the world around him. The connection between destroying inner weakness and becoming invulnerable to external attacks is not coincidental. When a man masters himself, he has nothing left to fear. No criticism can shake him because his validation comes from within. No circumstance can break him because his strength is rooted in his own choices and discipline. No enemy can conquer him because his greatest enemy has already been defeated, his former self. This is the foundation upon which everything else is built. Before engaging with the 7 daily practices, a man must understand why they matter. He must recognize that lust is not the enemy. Lust is merely a symptom of the deeper enemy, which is the fragmented, undisciplined, purposeless self. Once he understands this, he will approach these practices not as restrictions but as liberations. He will see them not as deprivations but as investments in his own sovereignty. The journey that lies ahead is not easy, but it is infinitely worth the effort. Those who complete it will look back at their former selves with a mixture of compassion and gratitude. Compassion for the pain that weak version endured, and gratitude that they had the courage to change. This is the transformation that awaits. Part 2. The 7 daily practices for destruction of weakness. The first practice. The ritual of cold discipline through early rising. The day begins before the world demands anything of you. This is not merely a matter of waking up early. It is a matter of claiming sovereignty over your own time and body. A man who cannot control the simple act of leaving his bed is a man who has already surrendered his willpower to external circumstances. The alarm sounds, and in that precise moment the day's first battle occurs. Those who practice this understand that the moment you hit the snooze button, you have made a deal with weakness. You have sent a message to your mind that comfort is more important than your goals. You have weakened the signal that governs your entire day. The practice begins with a commitment. When the alarm sounds, you rise immediately. No negotiation, no justification. This single act, repeated daily, becomes the foundation of all other discipline. Rising early in darkness before the sun has broken the horizon connects a person to something ancient and powerful. In those early hours, the world is silent. The distractions have not yet begun. There is no one else awake to demand your attention. In this space, a man can sit with himself in uninterrupted awareness. He can meditate on his purpose. He can visualize the person he is becoming. He can prepare his mind for the battles ahead. What makes this practice so transformative is that it establishes a truth that reverberates through every hour that follows. You are the master of your time, not your impulses, not your comfort, not the expectations of others. You. This is authority over self. And once a person experiences what it feels like to command his own body through one complete act of discipline, he discovers that the capacity for discipline is not a fixed trait he either possesses or lacks. It is a muscle that grows stronger with use. The coldness referenced here is literal. After rising from bed, the second part of this practice involves exposure to cold water. A cold shower or cold plunge is not comfortable, but it is transformative. In that moment of submersion in cold water, the impulse to escape is overwhelming. The breath becomes sharp. The instinct to retreat is powerful. And yet, the practice is to remain, to breathe, to allow the body to adapt, to command the nervous system to calm despite discomfort. This practice trains the mind to separate sensations from commands. It teaches that discomfort is not an emergency. It is not a signal to stop. It is merely a sensation, neutral and temporary. This fundamental reorientation of your relationship with discomfort is precisely what breaks the hold that lust maintains over the mind. Lust thrives in a psyche that has agreed that comfort and pleasure must be pursued immediately. This practice says no. It demonstrates that the person can experience discomfort and remain stable, remain focused, remain in control. By the time a person has completed the ritual of early rising and cold discipline, the day has been claimed. The victory may seem small, but it is not. It is everything. It is proof that you possess the power to override your impulses. It is the foundation upon which the remaining 6 practices are built. The second practice, the redirection of energy through physical exertion. The human body contains a tremendous amount of vital energy. In those who are enslaved to lust, this energy becomes trapped in a cycle of desire and temporary relief, leading to a form of energy depletion that is both physical and psychological. The second practice involves the deliberate channeling of this energy into activities that build rather than deplete. Physical exertion, whether through weightlifting, running, martial arts, swimming, or any form of intense physical training, serves multiple functions simultaneously. On the surface, it burns the excess energy that might otherwise be redirected toward lust. But more importantly, it reconnects a person with his body in a way that is empowering rather than enslaving. When you are lifting a heavy weight, your mind cannot wander. When you are running at maximum effort, your entire being is focused on the present moment. This is the peace that comes from total presence. The practice requires commitment to a form of physical training that is challenging and progressive. It is not sufficient to engage in casual movement. The practice demands intensity. It demands consistency, the resistance of the weight, the burn of muscles being pushed to their limits, the expansion of cardiovascular capacity. These are not punishments. They are reconnections with your own strength and capability. As the weeks progress and the body grows stronger, a remarkable transformation occurs in the mind. A person begins to experience what his body is truly capable of. He discovers that he is not weak. He is not powerless. He is not a victim of his impulses. Every new personal record in training becomes proof of this. Every difficult workout completed despite fatigue is evidence of inner strength. The body becomes a source of confidence rather than a source of shame. This practice also addresses the biochemistry of lust at its roots. Intense physical exertion floods the system with endorphins and other neurochemicals that provide genuine pleasure and satisfaction. This is not escape, this is fulfillment. The person who exercises intensely every single day experiences a natural elevation of mood and a natural reduction in the psychological hunger that lust is attempting to satisfy. The commitment is non-negotiable. Every single day, regardless of how busy, tired, or unmotivated you feel, you engage in physical exertion that challenges your capacity. This is not negotiable. This is the price of freedom. The third practice, the cultivation of mental discipline through meditation and awareness. While physical discipline reshapes the body and the biochemistry of the brain, mental discipline reshapes the very way consciousness operates. The third practice is the daily practice of meditation and mindfulness, not the soft, passive meditation that seeks escape, but the active, rigorous meditation that develops witnessing consciousness. In the practice, a person sits in stillness for a defined period, typically between 20 and 40 minutes. During this time, the instruction is simple. Observe your mind without judgment. Thoughts will arise. Thoughts of desire, thoughts of shame, thoughts of justification, thoughts of fantasy. The practice is not to suppress these thoughts or to judge them. It is to observe them as they pass through consciousness like clouds passing through the sky. This observation develops a critical capacity, the ability to see the difference between yourself and your thoughts. Most people live in complete identification with their thoughts. A lustful thought arises, and they believe that they are lustful. A desire emerges, and they believe that they must fulfill it. Through meditation, a person discovers a profound truth. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts arise. This distinction is everything. Once you realize that a thought of lust is simply a thought, that it is an object arising in consciousness rather than a command that must be obeyed, the hold that thought has over your behavior is broken. You begin to exercise choice. You begin to exercise freedom. The practice also develops the neurological capacity for focus and attention. As meditation strengthens the prefrontal cortex and weakens the reactivity of the amygdala, a person finds that he can maintain his attention on his goals and values rather than being perpetually hijacked by impulses. The mind becomes a tool under your command rather than a wild animal that commands you. The meditation practice must be consistent and deliberate. It is not sufficient to meditate when you feel like it or when you have free time. The practice requires a daily commitment, preferably at the same time each day, in the same location. This repetition creates neural pathways of discipline and awareness that spread into every other area of life. The fourth practice, the purification of sensory input and the creation of conscious environment. What enters the mind shapes the mind. This is not metaphorical truth. This is observable neuroscience. The fourth practice involves the deliberate and aggressive curation of what is allowed to enter your consciousness through sight, sound, and digital connection. For most people, this practice begins with the elimination of sexual and lustful imagery. This means removing access to pornography, removing social media accounts that feature sexualized content, avoiding movies and entertainment that trigger lustful thought patterns. This is not repression. It is hygiene. You would not drink from a contaminated water source if you were trying to heal your body. Similarly, you do not allow contaminated imagery into your mind if you are trying to heal your psychology. The practice extends beyond the explicit removal of sexual content. It includes a conscious examination of all media consumption. What books are you reading? What podcasts are you listening to? What conversations are you having? What images are appearing in your social media feed? Each of these is either nourishing or depleting, either aligned with your highest values or pulling you away from them. This practice requires the courage to say no to your environment. It may mean unfollowing people on social media. It may mean leaving social situations where the conversation or environment triggers old patterns. It may mean limiting time with people who actively undermine your transformation. This is not judgment of others. It is protection of self. The creation of a conscious environment extends to the physical space you inhabit, your bedroom, your office, your home. These spaces should support your goals rather than undermine them. Remove temptations. Create an environment that reminds you of who you are becoming. Place images of role models and reminders of your purpose in visible locations. The environment becomes a silent teacher, constantly reinforcing the new identity you are constructing. The fifth practice, the documentation of truth and the power of written clarity. The human mind is remarkably skilled at distortion and rationalization. When you are engaged in the old pattern of lust, the mind creates elaborate justifications. It minimizes consequences. It maximizes the anticipated pleasure. It loses sight of the damage being caused. The fifth practice interrupts this distortion through the power of written documentation. This practice involves the daily journaling of your experiences, observations, and transformations. Each day, you document what happened. You record the moments you felt temptation and how you responded. You write about your training, your meditation, your experiences of clarity and strength. You document the ways your mind is changing and your body is strengthening. The act of writing forces clarity. You cannot lie convincingly to yourself on paper. When you attempt to justify a lapse or rationalize old behavior, the words on the page reveal the truth. When you document the consequences of old patterns, they become undeniable. When you record the benefits of new practices, they become real in a way that vague feelings cannot achieve. The journaling also creates a record of transformation. Weeks will come when you feel unmotivated or doubtful. In those moments, you can return to your journal and see the evidence of how far you have come. You can read about struggles that once seemed insurmountable, but that you overcame. You can see the pattern of your own strength emerging. This practice is not about perfection. You do not need to write eloquently or lengthily. You need to write truthfully. 5 minutes of honest reflection each day, documenting your experiences and insights, is far more valuable than hours of generic reflection. The sixth practice, the reconnection with purpose and the alignment of daily action with deepest values. Lust thrives in the vacuum created by purposelessness. When a man has no compelling direction for his energy and attention, lust becomes the path of least resistance. The sixth practice involves the deliberate and repeated connection with your deepest purpose and the alignment of your daily actions with this purpose. This begins with clarity. What are you actually building? What is the person you're becoming? What values guide your actions? What would you want said of you when you look back at your life? These questions are not asked once and then forgotten. They are asked regularly, revisited, and deepened. Once this clarity exists, the practice involves translating purpose into daily action. Each day begins with a conscious connection to purpose. Why are you rising early? So that you can control your day rather than be controlled by circumstance. Why are you training? So that you can be strong, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. Why are you meditating? So that you can develop mastery over your own mind. Why are you avoiding lustful content? So that your mind remains clear and your energy remains directed toward what matters. This practice involves the creation of goals and the consistent pursuit of these goals. These goals should not be abstract. They should be concrete and measurable. They should be challenging enough to require all your strength and attention. When a person is fully engaged in the pursuit of meaningful goals, there is no psychological space left for the endless cycling of lustful thought. The practice also involves the cultivation of meaning through contribution. A person who is only focused on his own transformation will eventually find the work monotonous. But a person who is working to become the strongest version of himself so that he can better serve others, protect those he loves, create something of value, or contribute to something larger than himself, this person has tapped into an inexhaustible source of motivation. The seventh practice, the establishment of connection and the breaking of isolation. The final and most often neglected practice is the deliberate creation of authentic connection and the breaking of the isolation that enables addiction and weakness. Many people attempt to overcome lust in complete isolation, confiding in no one, sharing their struggle with no one, and finding accountability with no one. This approach fails because it reinforces the very shame and isolation that lust depends upon. The seventh practice involves the development of genuine human connection around your transformation. This may take the form of finding a mentor or coach who understands the journey and can provide guidance. It may involve finding a community of people engaged in similar transformation. It may involve sharing your journey with a trusted friend or family member who can provide support and accountability. The connection need not be extensive. Even one person who knows what you are working toward, who you check in with regularly, who can call you on your excuses, who can remind you of your purpose when you waver. This is transformative. The human being is a social creature. We are designed to be seen, to be known, and to be part of something larger than ourselves. This practice also involves the cultivation of relationships that are authentic and deep rather than shallow and entertainment-based. Rather than spending time scrolling through social media or consuming entertainment, you invest time in genuine connection with real people. You listen to their stories. You share your own truth. You contribute to their growth as they contribute to yours. The practice is vulnerable. It requires the courage to be seen, to admit struggle, to ask for help. But it is precisely this vulnerability that liberates. When you stop pretending to be someone you are not and allow yourself to be authentically struggling and growing, you discover that other people relate to this far more than they relate to a false facade of perfection. Part 3. The emergence of invulnerability and the transformation into unshakable being. The day arrives when a person realizes something has fundamentally shifted. He looks at situations that would have triggered lust in the past, and there is no response. There is merely observation. He experiences challenges and obstacles that he would once have turned to lust to escape, and he simply faces them. He feels the stirrings of old patterns, and he recognizes them as they arise, observes them without judgment, and allows them to pass. This is not the result of a sudden miracle. It is the result of 40 days of early rising. It is the result of 200 hours of physical exertion. It is the result of endless hours of meditation, where consciousness has been trained to witness rather than react. It is the result of deliberate choices made thousands of times to nourish the mind with clarity, rather than contaminate it with distortion. What emerges from this practice is not a person who is constantly struggling against lust. That person no longer exists. What emerges is a person who has achieved a fundamental shift in his relationship with desire itself. Desire still arises. This is the nature of being human. But desire no longer dictates action. Desire has been brought under the dominion of conscious choice and conscious purpose. The transformation is profound because it extends far beyond the issue of lust itself. The practices that destroy lust simultaneously build unshakable inner strength across every dimension of life. The early rising practice that destroys lust simultaneously builds the capacity to master your own time and energy. The physical exertion that redirects lustful energy simultaneously builds confidence, resilience, and embodied power. The meditation that creates witness consciousness simultaneously builds the ability to remain calm and focused under pressure. The purification of sensory input that removes lustful content simultaneously creates mental clarity that extends to problem-solving and creativity. The journaling that documents lust simultaneously creates the capacity to learn from experience. The alignment with purpose that destroys the vacuum where lust grows simultaneously creates a sense of direction and meaning that sustains through every difficulty. The connection with others that breaks the isolation enabling lust simultaneously creates a sense of belonging and support that sustains through every trial. A man who has truly destroyed his weak self cannot be destroyed by external forces. This is not because he has become invincible in the physical sense. It is because his foundation has moved from external validation to internal authority. It is because his peace comes from his own discipline rather than from circumstances aligning the way he prefers. It is because his strength comes from his own choices rather than from the strength of his position. When challenges arise, and they always do, he is unmoved. When others criticize him, and they sometimes will, he has no need to defend or to justify. When circumstances shift against him, and they periodically will, he adapts rather than breaks. When desires and impulses arise, and they forever will, he simply observes them and returns to his purpose. This is the freedom that awaits on the other side of the journey. This is not the freedom to indulge in every desire. This is the freedom that comes from having mastered desire. This is not the freedom to avoid difficulty. This is the freedom that comes from having developed the capacity to walk through difficulty unchanged. The person who reaches this point and looks back at his former self sees the cost of that old way with absolute clarity. The fatigue, the shame, the time wasted, the relationships damaged, the potential squandered, the sense of powerlessness that came from being controlled by impulses. And he is profoundly grateful that he made the choice to change. But this gratitude is not sentimental. It does not mean he rests on the accomplishment. The 7 practices do not become unnecessary once the transformation has been achieved. They become the foundation of the life he now lives. Early rising is no longer a struggle against laziness. It is simply how his day begins. Physical exertion is no longer a compensation for lust. It is how he maintains his strength. Meditation is no longer a tool to fight desire. It is how he maintains his clarity. Purification of his environment is no longer a desperate measure. It is simply the standard of his life. The documentation continues as a record of ongoing learning. The alignment with purpose becomes the organizing principle of every choice. The connection with others becomes a source of ongoing nourishment. The 7 practices have become not things he does, but things he is. They have become integrated into the very fabric of his being. They have become as natural as breathing. And in this integration, they reveal their deepest secret. They are not restrictions. They are the path to genuine freedom. They are not deprivations. They are the way to fullness. Years into this journey, when a person reflects on the question of whether he would ever return to his former patterns, the answer is not, I must not, or I should not. The answer is simply, I cannot. Not because he is constrained by external force, or by shame, or by fear of consequence, but because he has tasted what it is to be free. He has experienced what it is to be in command of himself. He has felt the power of a mind directed by conscious choice rather than hijacked by impulse. He has lived the life of a man who is truly strong, and he would not trade that for anything. And here lies the greatest irony of the entire journey. The person begins believing that the 7 practices are things he must do to not fall back into weakness. He ends discovering that the 7 practices are things he would never want to stop doing because they are the substance of everything that makes life worth living. They have become not the price of redemption, but the reward itself. This is the man who cannot be destroyed by others, not because he is hard or defensive or isolated, but because he is whole, because his strength comes from within, because his validation is internal, because his purpose is clear and his alignment is consistent, because his discipline is not burden, but liberation, because his mind is his own, because his body is his own, because his will is his own. The transformation that begins with a simple choice to destroy weakness and master yourself ends in a complete reclamation of your own power. And the beautiful part is that this transformation is available to any person who makes the decision and then demonstrates the courage to follow through, day after day, through every difficulty, until the weakness is not just suppressed but truly destroyed, and what remains is something infinitely stronger and more real.